I'm Susana Gardner. I am the cataloging librarian and archivist at the Island Free Library. I am also a writer and poet. My first experiences, like intensely with James Joyce, would have to like be perhaps when I was about 20, and I read the portrait of the artist as a young man. It took me a little while to get through. It was a very different sort of text than I was used to, but I fell in love with it. And what's interesting is the more I read from Ulysses, the more I love it in a different way. Um, so it's exciting to be programming librarian here on Block Island, where I get to meet others and have reading salons or Bloomsday festivals at the library. So I'm going to participate too. I'm going to read from Molly's Soliloquy. I'm going to read from the first part, just a couple pages, and then I'm going to skip over um, to the last few pages. Okay. Molly's Soliloquy is also called Penelope. And I'm reading from the O'Brien edition of Ulysses. The press is in Dublin, Ireland. 3 a.m. I was a flower of the mountain. Yes. Yes, because he never did a thing like that before, as to get his breakfast in bed with a couple of eggs, since the City Arms Hotel, when he used to be pretending to be laid up with a sick voice, doing his highness, to make himself interesting to that old Mrs. Reardon, when he thought he'd had a great leg up, and she never left us a farthing, all for masses for herself, and her soul's greatest miser ever was actually afraid to lay out for day her methylated spirit, telling me all her ailments. She had too much old chat in her about politics and earthquakes and the end of the world. Let us have a bit of fun first. God help us. Help the world if all the women were her sort, down on bathing suits and low necks. Of course nobody wanted her to wear, I suppose. She was pious because no man would look at her twice. I hope I'll never be like her. A wonder she didn't want us to cover our faces. But she was a well-educated woman, certainly, and her gabby talk about Mr. Reardon here and Mr. Reardon there was, I suppose, he was glad to get shut of her, and her dog smelling my fur and always edging to get up under my petticoats, especially then. Still, I like that in him, polite to old women, like that, and waiters and beggars too. He's not proud of nothing, but always, if ever he got anything really serious the matter with him, it's much better for them to go into hospital where everything is clean, but I suppose I'd have to dring it into him for a month, yes. And then we'd have a hospital nurse next thing on the carpet, have him staying there till they throw him out, or a nun maybe, like this muddy photo he has. She's as much of a nun as I am. Yet, because they're so weak and pooling when they're sick, they want a woman to get well. If his nose bleeds, you think it was oh tragic, and that dying-looking one off the South Circular when he sprained his foot at the choir party at the Sugarloaf Mountain, the day I wore that dress Miss Stack, bringing him flowers, the worst old one she could find at the bottom of the basket, anything at all to get into a man's bedroom, with her old maid's voice trying to imagine he was dying on account of her, to never see thy face again, though he looked more like a man with his beard a bit grown in the bed. Father was the same, besides. I hate bandaging and dozing. When he cut his toe with a razor, paring his corns, afraid he'd get blood poisoning. But it was a thing. I was sick when we'd see what attention, only of course the woman hides it, not to give all the trouble they do. Yes, he came somewhere, I'm sure, by his appetite. Anyway, love, it's not, or he'd be off his feet thinking of her, so either it was one of those night women. if it was down there, if he really was, and the story he made up a pack of lies to hide it, planning it. Heinz kept me. Who did I meet? Ah, yes. I met. Do you remember Menton? And who else? Who let me see that big babby face? I saw him, and not too long married, flirting with a young girl at Pools, Miriana, and turned my back on him when he slinked out, looking quite conscious what harm he had the impudence to make up to me one time. Well done to him, mouth almighty, and his boiled eyes, all the big stupos I'd ever met, and they called for the solicitor. Only for I hate having a long wrangle in bed, or else, if it's not that, it's some little bitch or other he got in with somewhere or picked up on the sly. If they only knew him as well as I do. Yes. Because the day before yesterday, he was scribbling something, a letter, when I came into the front room for matches to show him Dignan's death in the paper, as if something told me he'd covered it up with the blotting paper to pretend to be thinking about business, so very probably. And that was it to somebody who thinks she has softly in him, because all men get a little bit like that at his age, especially getting on to 40. He is now so as to wheedle any money she can out of him. No. Fool like an old fool. And then the usual kissing my bottom was to hide it. Not that I care two straws who he does it with or knew before that way. I'd like to find out, so long as I don't have the two of them under my nose all the time, like that slut, that Mary he had in Ontario Terrace, patting out her false bottom to excite him. Bad enough to get the smell of those painted women off him. Once or twice I had a suspicion by getting him to come near me when I found the long hair on his coat without that one. When I went into the kitchen, pretending he was drinking water, one woman is not enough for them. It was all his fault, of course, ruining servants, then proposing that she could eat at our table on Christmas, if you please. Oh, no, thank you. Not in my house, stealing my potatoes and oyster, 2.6 per dozen. Out to see her aunt, if you please. Common robbery. So it was, I'm sure. But he had something on with which that one, it takes me to find out a thing like that, he said. You have no proof of it. Was her proof. Oh, yes. Her aunt was very fond of oysters. But I told her what I thought of her suggesting me to go out to be alone with her. I wouldn't lower myself to spy on them. The Gardners. I found in her room the Friday she was out. That was enough for me, a little bit too much. I saw to her that her face swelled up with temper when I gave her a week's notice. Better do without them altogether. Do out the rooms myself quicker. Only for the damn cooking and throwing up the dirt, I gave it to him anyhow. Either she or me leaves the house. I couldn't even touch him if I thought he was with a dirty, bare-faced liar, and Sloven like that with doying it up on my face and singing about the place and the wash closet too, because she thought she was too well off. Yes, because he couldn't possibly do without it that long. So he must do it somewhere. And the last time he came on my bottom, when it was the night boiling, gave my hand a great squeeze, going along by the toka in my hand. There steals another. I just pressed the back of his, like with my thumb, to press and squeeze the back, singing the young May moon she beams, loving. Love, because he has an idea about him, and me, he's not such a fool, he said. I'm dining out and going to the Gaiety, though I'm not going to give him the satisfaction in any case. God knows he's changed in a way. not to be always and ever wearing the same old hat unless I pay some nice looking boy to do it, since I can't do it myself. A young boy would like me. I'd confuse him a little alone with him if we were. I'd let him see my daughters, the new ones, and make him turn red looking at 'em, seduce him. I know what boys feel with that down on their cheek, doing that frigging drawing out thing by the hour, question and answer, would you do this? And the other with the coal man, yes, with the bishop, yes, I would, because I told him about some dean or bishop was sitting beside me in the Jews' temple's gardens when I was knitting that woolen thing, a stranger to Dublin. What place was it? And so about the monuments, and he tired me out with statues, encouraging him, making him worse than he is. Who is in your mind now? Tell me who you are thinking of, who it is. Tell me the name. Tell me the name, who the German emperor is it? Yes. Imagine I'm him. Think of him. Can you feel him trying to make a whore of me? What he never will, he ought to give up now at this age of his life. Simple ruination for any woman. No satisfaction in it, pretending to like it till he comes and then finish it off myself anyway. It makes your lips pale now. It does. Now, for once and all the talk of the world about it, people make it's only the first time. After that, it's just ordinary. Do it and think no more about why you can't. You kiss a man without going and marrying him first. You sometimes love to love wildly when you feel that way, so nice all over you. You can't help yourself. I wish some man or other would take me sometime when he's there and kiss me in his arms. There's nothing like a kiss, long and hot to your soul, almost paralyzes you. I hate that confession. When I used to go to Father Corrigan, he touched me, Father, and what harm if he did? Where? And I said, on the canal banks. Like a fool. But whereabouts on your person, my child? On the leg? Behind? High up? Was it? Yes. Rather high up. Was it? Where you sit down? Oh, Lord. Couldn't he say bottom right out and have done with it? And what has he got to do? What has that got to do with it? And did you, whatever way he put it, I forget. No, Father. And I always think of the real Father. What did he want to know? For when I already confessed it to God, he had a nice fat hand, the palm moist, always. I wouldn't mind feeling it, neither. Would he? I'd say, by the bull neck and his horse collar. I wonder. Did he know me in the box? I could see his face. He couldn't see mine, of course. He'd never turn or let on. Still, eyes were red. When his father died, their loss for a woman, of course, must be terrible when a man cries, let alone them. I'd like to be embraced by one in his vestments, and the smell of incense off him like the Pope. Besides, there's no danger with the priest if you're married. He's too careful about himself. Then give something to the Pope for a penance. I wonder, was he satisfied with me? One thing I didn't like his slapping me behind, going away so familiarly in the hall, though I laughed. I'm not a horse or an ass, am I? I suppose he was thinking of his father. I wonder, is he awake thinking of me or dreaming? Am I in it? Who gave him that flower? He said he smelled of some kind of drink, not whiskey or stout, or perhaps the sweetie kind of paste they stick their bills up with some liquor. I'd like to sip those rich-looking green and yellow expensive drinks, those stage door Johnnies drink with the opera hats I tasted once with my finger dipped out of that American that had the squirrel talking stamps with father. He had all he could do to keep himself from falling asleep. After the last time, after we took the pork and potted meat, it was a fine salty taste, yes. I felt lovely and tired and fell asleep as sound as atop of the moment I popped straight into bed till the thunder woke me up as if the world were coming to an end. God, be merciful to us. I thought the heavens were coming down about us to punish us. When I blessed myself and said a Hail Mary, like those awful thunderbolts in Gibraltar, and they come and tell you there's no God, what could you do if it was running and rushing and about nothing make an act of contrition? The candle I lit that evening in Whitefriars Street Chapel for the month of May, see, it brought its luck, though he'd scoff if he heard, because he never goes to church. Burst through his nose, though his nose is not so big after I took off my things. When the blinds down, after my hours dressing and perfuming and combing it like iron, or some kind of thick crowbar, standing all the time. He must have eaten oysters, I think, a few dozen. He was in a great singing voice. No, I never in all my life felt anyone had one that size of that to make you feel full up. He must have eaten a whole sheep after. What's the idea of making us like that with a big hole in the middle of us, like a stallion driving it up into you, because that's all they want of you, with that determined, vicious look in their eye. I had to half shut my eyes. Still, he hasn't such a tremendous amount of spunk in him. When I made him pull out and do it on me, considering how big it is, so much the better in my case. Any of it wasn't washed out properly the last time I let him finish it in me. Nice invention they made for women, for him to get all the pleasure. But if someone gave the touch of it themselves, they'd know what I went through. I love flowers. I'd love to have the whole place swimming in roses. God of heaven, there's nothing like nature, the wild mountains, then the sea, and the waves rushing then, the beautiful country with fields of oats and wheat and all kinds of things, and all the fine cattle going about that. Would do your heart good to see rivers and lakes and flowers, all sorts of shapes and smells and colors springing up even out of the ditches, primroses and violets. Nature, it is as for them saying there's no God. I wouldn't give a snap of my 2 fingers for all their learning. Why don't they go and create something, I often asked him. Atheists, or whatever they call themselves, go and wash the cobbles off themselves first. Then they go howling for the priests, and they dying, and why? Why? Because they're afraid of hell on account of their bad conscience? Yes. I know them well. Who was the first person in the universe before there was anybody that made it all? Who? That they don't know, neither do I. So there you are. They might as well try to stop the sun from rising tomorrow. The sun shines for you, he said, the day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Howth Head, in the gray tweed suit and a straw hat, the day I got him to propose to me. Yes. First I gave him the bit of seed cake out of my mouth, and it was leap year, like now, yes, 16 years ago. My God, after that long kiss, I near lost my breath. He said I was the flower of the mountain. Yes, so we are flowers, all a woman's body. Yes, that was one true thing he said in his life. And the sun shines for you today. Yes, that was why I liked him, because I saw he understood or felt what a woman is, and I knew I could always get round him, and I gave him all the pleasure I could, leading him on till he asked me to say yes. I wouldn't answer first, only looked out over the sea and the sky. I was thinking of so many things he didn't know of Mulvey and Mr. Stanhope and Hester and father and old Captain Groves and the sailors playing all birds fly, and I say stoop and washing up dishes. They called it on the pier and the sentry in front of the governor's house with the thing round his white helmet, poor devil, half roasted, and the Spanish girls laughing in their shawls and their tall combs, and the auctions in the morning, the Greeks and the Jews and the Arabs, and the devil knows for who else, from all the ends of Europe, and Duke Street, and the fowl market, all clucking outside Larby Sharon's, and the poor donkey slipping half asleep, and vague fellows in the cloaks asleep. In the shade of the steps and the big wheels of the carts and the bulls and the old castle, thousands and thousands of years old. Yes, and those handsome Moors, all in white and turbans like kings, asking you to sit down in their little bit of shop, and Rhonda with the old windows of the posadas, glancing eyes, a lattice hid for her lover to kiss, the iron and the wine shops half open at night, and the castanets, and the night we missed the boat at Algiers, the watchman going about serene with his lamp, and oh, awful deep down torrent, oh, and the sea crimson, sometimes like fire in the glorious sunsets and the fig trees in the Alameda gardens. Yes, and all the queer little streets and pink and blue and yellow houses and rose gardens and the jessamine and geraniums and cactuses in Gibraltar as a girl, where I was a flower of the mountain. Yes, when I put the rose in my hair like the Andalusian girls used to, or shall I wear red? Yes, and how he kissed me under the Moorish wall, and I thought, well, him as another, and then I asked him with my eyes to ask again. Yes, and then he asked me, would I? Yes, to say yes, my mountain flower. And first I put my arms around him. Yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts, all perfume. Yes, and his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said, yes, I will. Yes.